Should be any moment now.
Yeah.
All right, and we are live. Hi, guys. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of What's Politicking You Off. I'll introduce myself and then kind of let everybody do the same for themselves. So my name is Linda, aka Long Hair Linda.
Mike, Breadline Mike, Mortality for the clothing. Go and get it.
You're on mute.
Lamia, yeah, I just clocked I was on mute. Yeah, I'm Lams.
I'm Mr. Structure. Different words. People know me, call me all sorts of things. So Dino, Nuri, Nuruddin, all sorts of words. But yeah, from a footballing angle, Mr. Structure.
Nice. Okay, so speaking of structure, we don't really have any. We just kind of want to talk about what's been going on, what's affecting everyday life, whatever's really popped up for us individually, I guess, in the last maybe couple of weeks, especially. There's been so much in the news. It's ridiculous. I don't even know how to keep up at this point. Like, I don't know about anybody else, but I've pretty much stopped watching the news until something comes up on my Twitter timeline that I'm like, oh, I need to go check like what's actually going on. Go find a real article now. I've seen something's popped off that interests me. Let me go and actually find out, rather than, you know how, like, I don't know about you guys, but my, you know, like parents and older generation who just sit there and watch the news constantly. I don't know how you don't get fatigued by doing that, especially in this day and age. There's just so much going on.
I mean,
yeah. An agreement.
Sorry, guys.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah, it's ridiculous because you have to weigh in yourself, like how much of it plays to your mental health and how much there's always in it. The news mainly report all of the bad news that's going on around the world or nationally. Mm. So like it's the balance, especially during lockdown as well, where it's pulling on you. I mean, everybody's looking to the news, but I don't. And politically, I'm left. So I boycott everyone. I look on Twitter, I see what's happening, you know what I mean, and I look at it. But just a quick one, just to say before we get into the show, there's this been like the thing about the bill, the protest bill, and you know, like, and what the Tories are doing, the bill that they try to sneak through everything through to the country and sell it as, well, there's good bits to the bill, and yeah, destroying a statue that can get you 10 years and all of that kind of stuff. I'm like, well, the Guardian, the BBC, all of the mainstream, you all were on bandwagon demonizing Corbyn, demonizing the first ever like prime minister, and this guy was like, who was a pro-peace, and you know what I mean, anti-war, pro-equality in terms of all across it, and income equality. So now you're going on about the Tories, this like ethno-nationalist kind of super right-wing neo-fascist government, and now you're like, oh no, what are they doing? You're like, you supporting them, so save me. The hypocrisy just really gets me so angry. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to go on.
It's almost as if they profit from us being perpetually angry all the time, just furious about everything. It's almost as if that's what makes the money. Yeah. It's really sad that that there's something in us as human beings, right? That there's something in us that outrage does so well for people. All they're doing is picking up a formula and seeing that it works, right? So they go, these people are going to be upset, so let's upset them every day. Let's just upset them, because that's what's making them, in today's age, it's click, but back in the day, it's buy papers and, you know, actually watch the channel. And this is what getting people riled up is an easy way to make money. And then now we want to start talking about ethics and ethical journalism. It's like, well, not if they're making money from it. If they're profiting from it, ethics will go out the window. Guaranteed.
Yeah, completely. And even more so when you've got like the GB News coming in, which is definitely just going to be opinion based, like Fox News in the States, where it's not actually journalism driven. It's literally, I can say this because this is my opinion, and it can go out to millions of people like it's the news. And that is going to be so damaging for this country. And I don't think the general public understand how bad it's going to get. Like, there's going to be no centre left, never mind left, what can touch that type of audience, it's a scary place to be at the moment, and people don't understand what's coming. And that tied in with that police and crime in bill, which is made to suppress everything and everyone. It's very, very hard right coming, and it's a scary place to be, especially if you're not a white straight male. Like if you're not in my position, it's a horrifying thought.
And spoiler alert, even if you are a white straight male, if you don't have some wealth backing you, you're in it too at some point. It may not be as bad, it won't be as bad, but you're in it now at this point. Like, unless you have, the privilege of these like educational systems, unless your family is, legacy over at Eton and Cambridge and Oxford and all of this stuff, right? Unless you have this behind you, you're about to be in the same boat, a slightly nicer part of the boat, but the same boat nonetheless, and it's going down. So it's like, it's going to be a case of, how are we actually all going to be able to communicate and get through to each other in a way that's like conducive to some kind of unity? I know that when people usually talk about unity in mainstream, it's usually to tell people to shut up, usually to tell the left to calm down when we talk about unity, but real unity, actually coming together and seeing that this isn't working and it's only going to get worse. How do we do that? How do we get through all the noise and the rage and whatever else is being thrown at us and the distractions, of course, to do that?
I mean, for me personally, literally just to echo what all of you guys said, and you're all completely, absolutely right. I feel in a way it's a step away from democracy and towards a more dictatorship type world, where it's just, we don't like what you have to say. And the more that we don't like what you have to say, we are going to do everything we can in our power and our ability to stop you guys from being heard, to stop your voices being louder, being as loud as they're supposed to be, because we can't have that. At the end of the day, it's going to be so hard to actually see positive change and actual progression, because we don't have enough representation for people of, there's not enough women, there's not enough women of color, there's not enough men of color, there's not enough women and men representing other ethnic minorities in these positions of power for us to actually make a legitimate difference. That's why there is even talk of this bill actually even being allowed to pass, because when you think about who actually has the power to vote on this bill, it's not there's not very many or even at all representation for the majority, for people like us. So when I say people like us, I mean more, say me, Linda, say Nordine. And to be fair, Mike, you can even count yourself in that as well, to be fair, because like Linda said, it's a classism issue. If you don't fit into a certain class, even if you are white, British and male, because they don't like white East Europeans or Europeans that don't come from England either. And that's very clear to see in this country. And you can tell even just by the Brexit vote. So it's an issue of not even just race and gender, it's classism. It's classism as well. And just to echo what Nordine mentioned earlier, I think the gap between the working class, middle class, and the rich the gap is getting wider, and very soon there's going to be no middle class. There's just going to be poor and really rich, and that, unfortunately, that's the direction which is heading. And there has to be, and so Nordine, hats off to you, props for you for going through to this protest, supporting this protest, because it needs to be done. We cannot have these people taking away our rights. Our right to protest is our right to actively inform the government. We are not in agreement with their current policies. We're not agreeing with what they're trying to do. So this is a right we need to fight for. Sad, but can't believe this is happening.
Ollie, I mean, protest is this is how to distinguish what a protest movement, and then we look at the history, the suffragists, the different working class movements, the anti-racist movement in the 70s, you know what I mean? Love music, hate racism, love football, hate racism. All of these were grassroots organizations, grassroots fights on the streets. That's what they were, and they want to be done with that. And the idea that a statue, you could get 10 years for a statue, damaging a statue, but then rapists will never get 10 years for raping a woman or violently assaulting a woman. Do you know what I mean? It's these things, and it shows you the priority. We are descending into, and I agree what you're saying with already what the media landscape, the mainstream media landscape what already is. We are descending into a very dictatorial, neo-fascist state. We are, but with Murdoch and these others, and the likes of the Andrew Neils, who's the editor of The Spectator, and them getting a piece of the junk in media and be backed by neo-fascist billionaires. A lot of them come from the US, and they're the ones who fund Turning Point UK and Turning Point USA. These are the people, like there are billionaire fascists who are funding these media organizations, and how that power is moving and that money is moving. But it's happening. And to me, I always think that we are whether we like it or not, we are the 51st state. You know, whatever's happening economically and politically in the US is always happening here. And it's really interesting just going off that in terms of how media, how there is lack of representation. And you said it, Lami, that how much of it is in the media and people to stand up and actually voice the reality, how that are not allowed to do that. It was interesting that I was getting a couple of like text messages from relatives and friends of friends who I've been in contact with in the US going, wow, because of the Merkel thing, we didn't know the UK was that racist. And I'm like, like only you experience racism in the US? Like that to me just seemed like a kind of some dystopian world. Like, wow, just because British people speak nice, and it's according to the Americans, because of the accent, they're kind of infatuated with the accent and the way British people speak. Nothing on racism. This country, philosophers, pseudo-scientists, intellectuals invented racism in this country. This was the mother hub. This is number one colonizer in the world. You know, number one colonizer. So this notion, what's happening, and the idea of protest and how much protest works, even though people think protest and public pressure and direct action don't work. I've been protesting since I was a kid, like since I was a teenager, because of anti-racism and anti-war stuff. So that idea that is not working, and people are, oh, what are you doing? The biggest thing for me, every protest I've ever gone is always said, not in my name. Not in my name, because the frustration of feeling feeling so powerless, that's the only thing that you've got, is to go in the streets and voice your discontent. That to be taken away is further silencing and demonizing of working class and ethnic minorities in this country. Because apparently, according to them, we are getting above our station. That's what we're doing. We get just for fighting for equality and equal rights, we are above our. But the biggest thing, just going back to what you were saying, like that, yeah, even though you're white, male, straight, they're coming for you as well, because they're like in that bill, on that crime bill, it says travelers and Irish, and it uses the word, I hate the word gypsy because it's a demeaning thing, but to travelers, especially Irish travelers, it's like, to me, it reminds me of that famous poem. To me, I wrote on my status on Facebook was, first they came for the travelers until they come for you. You know what I mean? I don't know if you know that famous poem where they said, first they came for the trade unions. I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came. Then at the end of the poem, it's like, then they came for me. And there was nobody to defend me or to stand in solidarity with me. So I think more people don't understand how much this is. And also, people need to understand, because of COVID, they're using this thing, and COVID tried to rush this through. Now, apparently, they backed off a little bit from the bill, because the third reading should have been done in Parliament sometime next week. But they backed off a little bit because they've seen this massive pressure from people going, what the hell are you doing? You cannot do that. But they've got 80, you know, the Tories have 80, you know,
80 majority.
80 majority, and we need at least 40 or something like that to vote against it, and no way are they going to vote against it. So apparently they're going to bring it back in May for the third reading. But to me, what was more disgusting was the opportunistic of the Labour Party, what I call the Tories, because don't get it twisted, people. We haven't got a Labour Party anymore. We've got Tory Party, then we've got Tory Light Labour Party. Like, that's what we've got. And the opportunistic, the way they were like, we're going to abstain because we want to be seen on tough on crime, because we need to win back those seats in the north of England and in different parts of the country where white working class people have to be patriotic, and we have to to be tough on crime, all of that just shows you it's disheartening. It's heartbreaking. And I agree with you, Lami. I think we need to build. The question you asked, Linda, was that what can we do? I think we have to stop getting involved in terms of party politics. We have to go back, because there isn't any party there at this moment in time in the British system that sees majority of the view of this country. So what we need to go back to is mutual aid groups, grassroots, multicultural, multiracial, multi-sexual orientation, coalition. And we have to build that. We have to come together on those things, and class. And it has to be a class solidarity thing for us to get anywhere, to put any pressure on any political parties.
Yeah, you'd have to also defeat the tribalism what comes within this country, though. And I think that's harder than anyone can think of. Like, trying to get people to see everyone that is in this together in this country seems harder than anything in the world. Like, even if it was a threat from outer space, like, we would still bicker and argue about how to deal with it between us. Like, the political system's broken the way it works. It's a very few voices, like, for even fewer areas. If you think about how it works, like the way the public's spread out now, it's not as centric as it was. Everything needs to be rewritten from the bottom up, voting wise, and I think that's going to be hard to do because the parties in charge are quite happy to leave it like that.
Yeah, I'd push back on that. I wouldn't say that the political system is broken. I think it's working exactly how the people in power want it to work, which is, think about it.
For the people, then.
Yes, so it's broken in terms of for the people, for us, the people that it actually affects on a daily basis, right? And I think that it's really, really important to always remember that if our voices weren't so powerful, if unity among the majority of society and kind of understanding what is happening and having clarity and being able to push back against things that you feel are not in your best interest, if that wasn't powerful, they wouldn't go to these lengths to suppress that. They wouldn't go to the lengths that they do to suppress voting. They wouldn't go to the lengths that they do to silence people. They wouldn't go to the lengths that they do to do things in secret because they're afraid of public backlash. If that wasn't a powerful thing, they wouldn't be afraid of it. They'd just be like, this is what we're going to do. And this is how you're just going to have to get over it. So I think that it's really like going back to the initial thing of, how do we all kind of unify? How do we all kind of understand that we have a lot more in common than we don't? And I think one great thing might be to understand that our voices are powerful and we need to use them more, but also understand how we're using them. Understand that it's not necessarily being out marching in the street that does it, though that obviously is an incredible way to get your voice heard. But your voice is also heard in how you spend. So where does your money go to? Who are you spending your money with? Where are you going and getting your supplies? What are you choosing to support with your purse, with your voice, with, how you go out and represent yourself in the world? How are you making your voice heard? And if you are supporting the very same people that are determined and hell-bent on keeping you as poor as possible so that they can remain as rich as possible, then you're doing their work for them. If you are on the internet and you are minding your own business and then something comes across, on the timeline where people are talking about how people like them or people that pray like them or people that look like them are being oppressed, and you decide that is now your turn to go in and disrupt that conversation and put in a hashtag all lives matter or a hashtag not all men when it wasn't even about you. If you go in and do that, then you're working for the people that are determined to keep that oppression alive because they are getting some kind of power from it. And so I think that we're gonna have to face it if we're ever going to make any real progress. And then I'm not talking about the little steps that we take and then the million steps that we seem to go back, right? I'm talking about real change in our society. If we're ever going to do that, we're going to need to start on the smallest things. We're going to need to start on looking at ourselves in the mirror and looking at how we participate in society and take a little bit of individual responsibility in what we do and how we appear in the world. Because if we don't, we're never going to hear each other. We don't even know what we're doing, let alone how we're going to relate to somebody else. If we don't even understand that supporting that corporation by getting your coffee there every day is never, ever, ever going to make them think about their racist policies or how they treat women or the gender pay gap, they're never going to think about it because they're always getting money from you. So it's these little things where I think we have to actually start saying, well, look, what am I supporting? What am I showing up for and representing when I leave my house every day, or the bills that I pay? Who am I choosing to support in this? There are certain things you can't help, right? There are only so many internet providers, right? And there are only so many, you're never going to avoid BT, for example, unless you go with Virgin, in which case you've just gone with another massive corporation. Like, there's certain things that you cannot help, but there are so many that you can. And there are so many things that you can show up for without necessarily marching in the streets, if marching in the streets isn't in your DNA. It's not for everybody. And I think that we just have to understand how we help the people that we help. Who are we helping? Are we helping the people or the 1% that are continuously profiting off our misery and everything else that seems to be going on in the news at the minute?
Agreed.
I mean, Linda, you absolutely nailed it. And I cannot even agree with you more. It is literally all about who you support. Because before, and I wasn't even really made conscious about this until maybe about June last year, where I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, like, I've spent this amount of money on that. I wasted this amount of money on this monthly subscription. I've bought clothes from this company, this, that, and the other. And I'm sitting here thinking, this is money I'm putting into all of these corporations that are supposedly owned, or they're under the same umbrella as these other companies that basically run in shit. They are, sorry, excuse my language, but they are running stuff, basically. They are running the world. And that was one of the first times where I just kind of stopped, took a step back and thought, do you know what? Why am I investing my money, my paper, into these companies? This is why they keep winning, because they keep on making money. They're profiting off of us. So when we consciously stop and think, okay, instead of putting in my money for buying clothes or something from ASOS or like Pretty Little Thing, why don't I invest my money into, there's a local upcoming business, one of your friends or your friend's family or a mutual friend or family member has just come up with a clothing line. They've just released a website. They're starting to support the local businesses, support the small businesses, support your friends, support your family, support people who look like you. Because when you put money into their pocket, they put money back into your pocket, and vice versa. And this is how we grow. This is how we make a mark. This is how we make a difference in the world. I want to bring up an example that happened in America in the 1920s. So the Tulsa riots, people may be aware, people might not be aware, but Tulsa, Oklahoma, was known as the Black Wall Street for a reason, because this is where Black people could come and congregate together, African Americans, and live. They had a thriving economy. The economy was thriving so much. And these racists, these supremacists, they couldn't stand it. They couldn't stand to see them doing so well for themselves. They couldn't stand the smartness and the intellect they came up with to do this, to make this happen, to get themselves to try and compete on the same level as these people. They couldn't stand it. And they went and massacred them all. Now, records will probably tell you about 30 to 40 odd people died, but really and truly it was between 300 and 400 people. And there's many unmarked graves and missing family members to this day that still haven't been recorded, but they died in the Tulsa riots. And this brings me exactly back to the point where we don't know where the danger is. We can't do anything for ourselves without thinking, oh, okay, if we try and do this, what's to say that, like you said, somebody in a high position of power is not going to come in and just step on that? And then what power do we have to counteract that? And it brings me back to the point about what Nordine was saying, what Mike was saying, and even Linda. We don't have enough people representing us in this. We really don't. We don't know as women where the danger comes from, because if we're walking down the street, how am I supposed to know this guy walking opposite me is a normal guy, respects women, probably has a couple of daughters, a wife, mother. Well, I don't know that. I don't know that. He's not wearing a sign for me to know that. All I know is that as a woman, from my experience, from talking to other women who shared in previous experiences, and when I tell you the conversations that I've had with some women, it shocks me. It actually shocks me how many women have been raped, sexually abused, or sexually harassed. It's actually shocking. And I don't think I've met a single woman in my lifetime, in all 25 years I've been living, who hasn't experienced at least one of those things. And it's scary because when you are a woman, when you are walking down the street, when you are coming home from work, say you've done a late shift, you don't know who poses the danger to you. And bringing it back to obviously the Sarah Everard case, what happened to her was done by a police officer, which is even worse because it brings you back to the same point. Be it a man.
Sorry, can I just add an allegedly?
Yeah.
He hasn't been convicted yet. I just want to add an allegedly in there.
There you go. That just pissed me off even more, to be honest. But it just kind of goes to show, this is my point. These people who are supposed to be protecting us, men and police officers, right? They're supposed to be protecting women. They're supposed to love women, respect women, protect them. And they're harming us. They're hurting us. They're hunting us, basically. Even one corrupt police officer is bad, because you don't know when you're in danger, when you need help, when you need somebody to come and be there for you. That one phone call that you make, they might send that one racist police officer, that 1 out of 10, that one racist, sexist police officer to come to your aid. And that is it. That is it. That's all it takes is one. So if there's even one bad seed, if there's one bad egg, it just corrupts the whole system, the whole hierarchy. And it's the same thing with men. Men need to be responsible and know that as women, we're scared, we're intimidated. There's so many situations where I'll turn the corner, I need to walk to a bus stop to get a bus to go home, and I'm seeing about 8 to 10 men at that bus stop. I'm like, nope, I've got to turn, I'll walk to the next bus stop. I have to find another alternative, because I know the discomfort that I'm going to feel, the harassment that I'm going to experience is scary and intimidating, and a lot worse has happened. And I do feel, again, this is something that is a problem. It's a problem, and we can't sit here and deny that violence against women hasn't been going on it's been going on since the dawn of time. And a lot of that is to do with the way we educate our young sons, our young daughters. We teach our daughters, oh, don't wear this, don't wear that, you're exciting little boys, you're exciting this, cover up, don't do this. And we teach our boys, oh, it's okay. It's okay to be excited. It's okay. Oh, it's okay to do this. Oh, you're just curious. It's fine. And I think that's what needs to change, the way we educate young boys and young girls. And I'm not a parent just yet, but, eventually I would like to have a family. And these are fears. These are legitimate, genuine fears I have, because I'm just thinking, oh my God, if I have a daughter, there's these problems. If I have a son, there's these problems. It's a really scary time. And I'm not sure if any of you guys are parents. I know Bob's is as well, so he could definitely give his opinion. But, it'd be interesting to hear what you guys think as well.
I'm not a parent, but I understand 100% that violence against women or violence against that men perpetuate is our problem, is a men's problem. It's not a woman's problem, and it's not young girls' problem. It's boys' problem, and like I think the stat is like, I think 3 to 4 women a week die in this country per week because of ex-partner, their current partner, husband, murdering them. All I know is that if that amount of men were dying a week, there would have been some laws in this country. And let's just say like super middle class men were dying, there would have been like 20-year sentences, like just there'll be so much things put in place. But obviously is actually majority is working class and middle class as well. But a lot of these men, it's the toxic masculinity, isn't it? Like I think the biggest thing what people mistake about masculinity and femininity is that it exists within all of us. Like the idea that I am not gonna have feminine traits, or I'm not gonna be feminine. I came from a woman. Are you kidding me? Like I grew inside a woman's body, like, and I'm supposed to run away from being feminine or having, and the ideas of what feminine and masculine traits, what they represent in this kind of like Western, what is a Western, you know, construct. There are places, there's civilizations in Africa before colonization that don't even, there's even cultures around the world that don't even have the words for man and a woman, or masculine and feminine. These things don't exist. So I think there's a lot of things we have to unpack and a lot of things we have to understand. But how violence is perpetuated against women in the society, in so-called civilized society, is horrific and it's horrendous. You know, to me, my politics determines how I value and view everybody in this world. You know, my politics judges that, and only because the examples that I was showing as a young black kid growing up in, you know, Moss Side, Rusholme, the South Central Manchester, and the views of people for all walks of life who are instilling these values, and the idea that you see a woman as less than you, and the idea of women, and you talked about it, Lami, that it's the conditioning, it's the earliest conditioning. I mean, I'm a 90s, I was in the teens in the 90s, late 90s, and I remember the things that was instilled into me, like my girlfriend's body parts belong to me. That's what society was teaching me. Like literally, that's how I was conditioned until, you know what I mean? That's how I was conditioned by popular culture, by the things that I was seeing. And it was only through intervention, through different people who at certain times catching me and going, no, this is wrong, this is wrong. And certain things, and then I have to try to remember, when I was a kid, when I was in my early teens, there was these other values that were instilled into me and catch them. But when I'm full of testosterone in my mid to late teens, I'm thinking I'm a bad man. That's what the instincts were, like to possess, to control women. You know what I mean? Just the controlling of women. That was, and then only through relationships and breakups and stuff do you learn actually fulfilling of the prophecy, and that this idea of controlling another human being is a load of absolute BS. And how all this can be really, really kind of like, can lead down to violence, and how rape culture works. You know what I mean? How, all of these things. And it's, to me, the biggest thing is that when women talk, I listen, and I've always been, because I grew up with strong women. I'm of African descent. I wasn't born here. I was born in East Africa. And, you know, hell of a woman in my family that will bend my ears as a kid. But I came here, and then getting conditioned into a different culture in a different environment causes something else. But the idea that, yeah, and I don't, and not to say that in African context, patriarchy is not still running madness, but it's running madness in different cultures in different ways. But the problem is for men to talk to other men and young boys. I think, and it's the same thing with racism. Racism ain't a black people problem or any other minorities problem. Is predominantly white people, ones with power, who can do something. And it's the same thing for me. But just to reference that, when you're talking about when you're walking down the street, I don't know if those of you know Manchester, I live very close to the city centre. So when I go out raving, usually, well, I've not done in a year, and I'm just still devastated. But I would walk home because I'm so high from the music. I'm still high, and I will always have my phone, my earphones, and I would still put on similar music. So I would go to maybe, I think, the spa that's open, and I will walk all the way home because I'm still high, and I don't want to get in an Uber because I'm still like even dancing like a madman on the street, you know, hopping along. And that's when I realized, like, most of the privilege as a man, my male privilege. And it was shocking to see the fragility of male fragility, where people are like, not all men, like, ain't nobody talking. Why, if you know you're secure in your family and you treat other human beings as human beings, regardless of gender or sexual orientation, why would you be bothered? To me, it's a backlash of these people who are so fragile going, well, I've got some suspect. And if you were born in, if you grew up in the 90s, all of us, all men of that certain era, we all have some problematic issues, because that's how madness was running then, in terms of how women were demeaned and how women were subjugated and how controlled worked. But just the fragility of some of these people, and the hashtags are going around, not all men. And actually a lot of them were started by women. A lot, because right-wing women to say, oh, look at me, hey lads, I want to be part of the lads. I'm not with them. I'm not with these.
I'll call them the pick-me women. The pick-me's.
Yeah. Or we can call them, the double agents of patriarchy. Like there's black people who are double agents of white supremacy. You know what I mean? They'll go there to uphold white supremacy and literally carry the can for white supremacy. And those women who are carrying the can for patriarchy and toxic masculinity, and men can't be men anymore, because they can't beat somebody, or I can't grope a woman, or I can't rape a woman. What does that mean? Men can't be men anymore. And yeah, it's sad, but I waffled enough. But it's sad. But the biggest thing to say, the violence against women is with men, and how we are around when we're around, not to show off, to say that we're good guys, because I hate. A lot of people use the word nice. I never want to be a nice guy. I just want to be the humane person. You know what I mean? I don't want to be the nice guy. I want to be the humane person. And in front of the lads or the boys, if you want to get into that, or other men, how we say, no, that's not right. That's wrong. You know what I mean? And to run away and to think that you can hate women. Without women, there'll be nobody in this world. I try hard to try to speak to when I get into conversation with people. Without women, there ain't no life, people. That you ain't here. And how you're supposed to be hatred. That's how twisted conditioning works, to go and hate people who bring you into this world. Because what's the differentiation between you being a madman on the street, hassling and harassing and assaulting, then your auntie, there's all women in your life, and you won't like that happen to them. So why is it all right to happen to somebody else's daughter, sister? Yeah.
Just a quick point you said about nice guy. I'm a big fan of Kelechi Okafor, and she put it in a way that was fantastic. Look, I don't have to be nice to be kind. I'm only here to be kind, right? And if you are a follower of one of the main religions, a lot of the messaging is be kind to each other, kind to your neighbor, love thy neighbor, be kind. That has nothing to do with being nice. Sometimes me not being nice is actually me being kind. Sometimes I don't want to be nice because it would be fake. It wouldn't be how I really feel about a situation or a person, but that doesn't stop me from being kind, right? And I think that that's a really, really important distinction to make, and that we feel like we all have to be very nice and softly, and no, if it's not in your personality to do that, then it would just be completely facetious. And sometimes it's just not appropriate. It's not appropriate when you're talking about certain huge issues that affect people. When you're talking about harm, niceness isn't relevant or appropriate in that situation. It just isn't. And that brings me to the not all men. Honestly, the thing that annoyed me the most, aside from it being a tool that was clearly used to just try and show up, was that it's just so stupid. I'm one of these people that gets very irritated by stupidity when I feel like it is purposeful, right? When you are being purposefully ignorant, right? When you have the privilege of being ignorant, it's just, I hate it. Not all men doesn't mean anything. Stop it. It's an issue. That doesn't take away from the fact that it is an issue. I've even seen comments here talking about, they didn't say not all men in their defense. What they were talking about was men. When we were talking about women being scared of men, they were saying, well, men are more scared of men because, men also get killed by men. So we're in agreement then. Men are the issue. Yes, that's what we're saying. Okay, great. Next. So it's like when we talk about violence, when we're talking about people being killed, kidnapped and killed, like this is happening so much. And whether it is happening to women or men, if it hurts your feelings that we're only talking about the women in this particular second in time, then clearly let's just talk about the perpetrators, which continuously is men in massive numbers. There is a problem. Whether you want to hear it or like it doesn't matter. Whether you have an opinion that differs from it does not matter. The fact is, if we are talking about fact, there is a huge problem with men. I don't care whether you want to put all or some or a few or whatever you want to put in front of that. It does not faze me. There is a problem in this society with men. It is how they're being raised, right? It is how they're being taught by society and influences in society, in music, in film, in arts, in culture. There is something that is wrong with the messaging that young boys and older men are getting. There is something that's amiss. There is a problem. So now we need to talk about solutions, because we're not going to go back and forth as to whether there is a problem. There is one. There is one. It is affecting so many different people. It's affecting men, women, and non-binary. It's affecting everybody. But for the most part, it's being perpetrated by men. So we need to fix that issue. And hashtag not all men isn't fixing the issue. Davina McCall, so government is not fixing the issue. Like all of these, like you said, agents of, what do you say, agents of the patriarchy, the people that kind of turn up and are like, no, but we have to coddle. No, we don't. We have to address that there is a problem, because you can't talk about the suicide rates and the mental health of men without also talking about who is the majority issue, who is causing this. Who is causing this problem in men? And who suicide rates to go up so high in men? It's men. Mm-hmm. Talking to a young child and telling them that they have to be the man of the house, that boys don't cry, that you shouldn't show any emotion, you should keep it all in. What do you think happens when you keep all of your emotion in? What do you think happens when you are taught?
That's a very good point, Linda. I've never seen my father cry. I've never seen a tear come out of his ear in all the years I've been living. Never, not once.
And it's not because something hasn't happened in that time that would make a reasonable person feel that emotion, right? And feel the need to cry. But since when we were talking about masculinity and femininity, yes, we have it in both, because there's this amazing thing called balance, but whatever. There's this notion that the femininity is bad. That in itself is messaging that tells you there's a problem, right? Because you're treating as if one is better than the other, when we all have both. And we all benefit from both, but we're taught that one is bad. Okay, that's the first problem. The second problem is attributing regular human emotions like crying, like feeling upset about a situation, like feeling let down or frustrated. Like these are all now feminine traits and therefore are bad, and you shouldn't do them. What do you
Stop
think?
Being a bitch, grow a pair, all of that.
Being called pussy.
All of that,
right? It's always gendered. It's always brought back to the feminine side, and as if that's the bad thing. So if that's what we're all being conditioned as women as well, if we're all being conditioned that way, how is that going to show up? It's going to show up in the ways that it's been showing up now. When you get men who are not quite right in the head, and you give them a whole bunch of power, like say, I don't know, becoming up, and they feel they can, they can stalk them. They can use their power to try and get away with it. Maybe they kidnap them, right? Maybe they can be the officer that's now standing there, and the rooms have been found, and what are they going to do? Picture WhatsApp group, maybe email, little WhatsApp, minded police officers. Maybe that happens. Maybe and be these horrific, harmful people in our society. If they are taught this way throughout their lives, maybe they end up being the guy that also says hashtag not all men. None of this fixes the issue. We constantly talk around in circles, I found, in this country, which is really frustrating. We talk around in circles. I don't know if you notice it, but we do it a lot with race, but we also do it with gendered violence as well. And it's like you kind of have this discussion where you're trying to say, hey, guys, there's a problem here. Can we discuss solutions? And they go, no, there's no problem. No, guys, there's a problem. Here's another example of there being a problem. No, there's no problem. And that goes on for a little bit. And then they go, right, okay, well, yes, clearly there's a problem in this instance, right? We should look at how we can fix this problem. And then all of a sudden a distraction appears out of absolutely nowhere, and we'll all be talking about that. And then we go back, the people will remember and be like, hey guys, by the way, can we get back to the solutions for this problem? Go, oh wait, no, there's no problem. And then you do it again. And you have to go through it again. It is constant, right? Something massive will happen to distract everybody, and then it will go back to where you were right at the beginning, which is denying that a problem even exists. How are we ever going to move forward if we're just doing this constantly, having the same argument in circles? It's frustrating. And that brings me back to when we were talking about racism and how people in America or people in other parts of the country and people here will always talk about the incredible, very in-your-face examples of racism that is suffered by mainly African Americans, but also any people of color over in the States. And they also acknowledge that it happens here because it's such a slick way. It's so gaslighty the way it happens here, right? There will be blatant racism and they will look you in your face and they will say that didn't happen. Until you're tired of even saying it, you end up giving up. You just go, I can't. Every day I have to have this conversation. No, forget it. Clearly it didn't happen. Then it must be in my mind. And it's a very human reaction to have when you're constantly being told that what you are seeing with your own eyes, what you are hearing with your own ears, what you are experiencing in life isn't actually happening. How do we then get through all that noise and try to, now that we have people's attention, right? I mean, we had massive BLM protests. We've not seen numbers like this. And a lot of that is due to the fact that everybody was paying attention because everybody was on lockdown, right? So the murder of George Floyd was just so, you couldn't get away from it, right? You could not. And I feel like we had a similar kind of thing in this country with Sever Everard, where we could see that, you know, people weren't as distracted as they normally would be and everybody paid attention. So how do we use these moments to keep those conversations alive and hopefully stop going around in circles?
Exactly.
Everyone's just like,
yeah.
I really wanted to. You know what? I want to hear what the guys have to say. I'm
waiting for him to speak.
I don't really know how to answer what Linda's actually put forward there. I don't think it's as simple as that, but I think it goes back to the way people are brought up. So, but I think it's got to be a higher education at a younger age around these issues. I think kids learn far quicker than people give them credit. If you give a kid an iPad, I'm telling you, that kid can fucking master that iPad in half an hour, right? They can understand right and wrong very early. It can't be that hard just to be able to explain. And it's got to be, I don't really think punishment is what I usually go to for people. I don't like saying punishment is the way forward, but it's got to be stricter when you are older. You know better. Like, there's no right. It's a right and wrong. It's not as. It feels weird to politicize something what is so clear right and wrong. It's wild to me. I don't get it. It's right and wrong. It's no grey there. If it's violence, it doesn't matter who it's against. But that's the issue. I feel like we don't talk about violence in general enough to kids. I think that's a big feel, and I feel if you can do that, hopefully it should help take care of other issues. Like, if you can take care of classism, I think that takes care of a lot of other issues as well. Like, if you can make people feel more a community and no divides there, I feel that's the only way you can strive for things to get better. And it's got to be about education and, sadly, punishment when it's needed, and that's needed when you are of age. And it should be not a slap on the wrist. It should be noticeable. Like, you fucked up bad. Like, and it feels weird and bad to say that, because that punishment is so draconian. Like, people should be able to talk and see past things, but in this society we live in at the moment, I don't think it's possible, sadly.
Just want to go back to that. Oh, sorry,
just say we've got to stay hopeful.
I know, some optimism. Well, hopefully this will help, because you mentioned about education, right? And I think that's a great place to start, honestly, is education. And I just wanted to point out recently, so it's been reported that Black history lessons to be made mandatory in Welsh schools, if I can get my words together. So this is an article that was printed on the BBC website. So all children will be taught about racism and the contributions of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities, the education minister has said. Almost 35,000 people have called for Britain's colonial past to be taught in school lessons. Under changes to the new curriculum, the teaching of BAME histories will be made mandatory. So there is I just want to point out, though, that the changes they won't be made in the law, the school curriculum law, but instead in a code that could obviously then be changed and gotten rid of by ministers. But a start is a start. If we're talking about optimism and talking about being hopeful, I think it's definitely important to point out that there are people, there is some momentum, and I think it's always going to be about trying to, for lack of a better word, capitalizing on it, and try to push these important messages forward. So yeah, absolutely. Education is a great place to start. It's always going to be a great place to start. Stop erasing what has happened. Show people what is really happening, and so that we can show children and young people why it's wrong and why they need to be the generation that doesn't continue it.
But I also really think. Go ahead, Nordine.
No. Sorry, I was just saying
no, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Just to say that it's also in the home as well, and what kind of environment are we building? If there is lack of jobs, if there is just like, if like patriarchy affects especially the psyche of young men, it affects them because worthiness. So it's the conditions that are created, like in certain situations where that they might see, like the mother and dad might get into an argument and the dad might hit, but then that is teaching the next generation, what if it's a daughter there, she think, oh, well, my dad used to hit my mum and that's all right, my mum, they were all right. And then the son would be like, oh, my dad used to hit my mum, so I'm gonna hit you now when I'm older. Do you know what I mean? It's those things, and it's breaking that kind of cycle. But it all comes down to the inequality, and I think that's what you were on about, mate. That's what you were talking. You were saying is these things, the class issues, all of these different things, and all of this is more of equality. It's more of an equality, in a society where people don't have to, because violence, not to excuse, because I'm a massive believer in personal responsibility and accountability, but there are conditions that are created where people's everyday lives, the different stresses by society, and the cost of living and the worrying and the stressing, where men then is to excuse and say, well, you know what, that's what's going to happen. Because I feel as though more than anything, Black women suffer from that because of the intersection, more than anything, in terms of like where they understand they are almost erased. Like, you don't see that many Black women on television who are speaking truth. You don't see that because they don't allow Black women to speak their truth, or Black trans people, or like they don't in that kind of sense. But the intersections have been dealing with racism and then dealing with gender violence also, and in that intersection where Black men especially will get frustrated at what's going on there with the racism, but then take it out on the Black woman because you do that to the most people that are close to you. It's that proximity, it's proximity. I can't say that word, I'm dyslexic. But
proximity.
Proximity. Yeah, and that's how it works in that sense. But even the way the media, the reporting gender violence, how many Black women have been murdered by gender violence, don't even make the news. They don't make anything. But you know what I mean? Not saying that like condolences and the hearts go out to the family of Sarah Reid, and what's happened to her was obviously horrific. What happens to any woman or anybody, like to be dragged in the street and to be kidnapped and murdered, is just horrific. But just in that, how the racism still carries that as well when it comes to violence against, well, what sort of women are all right, more appealing to sympathy in mainstream society and culture than there is of those minority women, the women who are getting raped in detention centers as we speak, all of the different women's prisons, what's happening there, the abuses that are going on. Nobody wants to shed light on it, but it's just, I want people to think about that and remember that, like, there are all sorts of different kind of women, and there's all sorts of different kind of intersections. Violence against trans women is there as well, as clear to see, because the visibility aspect of how that is taking place as well in the society. So, sorry, Lami.
Yeah, no, that's literally, that's fine. I literally cannot disagree with anything you said. Just to basically echo it, and to echo what Linda said earlier, I honestly think the curriculum has to be changed. It has to be mandatory that in terms of history, in terms of learning about history, we learn about all aspects of history and not just the aspects that make this country, for example, British history, make us look good. Because I remember some of the stuff that I used to learn in school, and as soon as I was able to, when picking topics for my GCSE, I dropped history straight away. Not because I don't like history, I love history. When I go traveling, I always want to learn about the history of the country. I always go to museums, talk to locals, read books, journals, papers and stuff, because I'm so interested in finding out about the history of a country, of a group of people, because that's how we learn, that's how we grow, that's how we evolve. And I'm not surprised that there's so much hate, there's so much abuse, there's so much superiority versus inferiority within the people of the United Kingdom. Because I'm not surprised the way that some of these lessons are taught. They're taught to basically think that white British are the best, we are superior, we did this, that and the other, and everybody else is inferior. So when they go home to their mums and dads, especially if you're a small British white kid and you go back to your mum, you're like, oh mum, dad, I learned about the Battle of Hastings, or Henry VIII and Elizabeth I and this, that and the other. And oh yeah, do you remember? This is when it was completely white and we ruled everything, and we had the power, and it's not the same now because look at all these immigrants, they've come and taken it all away from us. So it's not difficult for a child to believe what is being taught to them, because that's what's being taught to them. They are taught that they are superior. That's what they learn in school. They learn about all these conquests, all these achievements, but there's another side to those conquests and those achievements that we don't get taught about. We don't get taught about the ugly side. They don't know about the sacrifices, the consequences that they had to go through to achieve that success, to achieve that goal. So be completely frank. Teach them about everything. Teach them about the true meaning of colonization. Teach them what slavery did. Teach them about the abolitionists and how they helped end slavery. Because at the end of the day, this is what it's about. Teaching people that even though we were segregated and divided, certain people knew and understood, because if it wasn't for white people, we'd still be enslaved. We'd still be in slavery. So we can't survive without each other. We all need each other. And I guess that's the point, understanding that not all certain people are bad, not all certain people are good, but at the end of the day, educating each other, understanding what needs to be done, the steps that need to be done, because like you said, we can't get anywhere unless we have these white people speaking out for us. And the only ones that are going to speak out for us are the ones who understand, like the abolitionists did to help end slavery. We need a similar sort of stance to take us forward, I think.
Just to touch on that history at school, that's such a great point, because I did the same thing. When it got to options, I was like, yeah, I don't like history. And I was convinced that I didn't like history. I told myself that's what it was. And I went throughout the rest of my sort of young life thinking, I just don't enjoy history. I picked geography instead and some other stuff. Like, that was interesting. And then when it got time to go to college and university, I did law at university, and that is basically all history. But it was legal history. And I couldn't understand why I liked that, but I didn't like history. And then it dawned on me once randomly, not even that long ago, I'm talking a couple of years ago is when it dawned on me, that there was no erasure in legal history. There was no bias. There was no slant on one side or the other. When you're actually learning about how the laws were formed, right? In terms of, particularly if you're learning about like judicial precedents and you're learning about the cases that came before it and how that then molded and shaped and formed what we do now. There's no erasure in that part, at least, right? Arguments can be made for other different bits about how legislation came about, fine. But if you're talking about the history in courts, the cases are right there for you to see. it's right clear as day how you can read the judgments as well and see what the judges at that time were thinking and how they processed that, and you can see how far you progress throughout the years. It's very, very easy to see it because it's there in these books. It's always indoctrined, right? You don't get that kind of same erasure that you do, or that same kind of slant and bias that you do with regular history classes at school. It's like we're just taught that Churchill was this incredible guy.
Yeah, but I would also argue when it comes back to the teaching stuff, like when it's Great Britain, everyone thinks Great Britain's because the empire and stuff, and not just because it's still a geography. Like great is in Greater Manchester, it's the surrounding areas, Britain and surrounding areas. It's not we're great because we had an empire. Like I think a lot of not very well educated white folk think that's what it is. Like, and that's why they say, "Oh, bring back the Great Britain," and it's fucking wildly stupid. But I feel like that's why education is a big part of it, is getting over simple points which will make everything a lot more easier for people to understand. And I think that's what gets lost in teaching.
But that's by design as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's by design as well. You're being taught that way or not taught certain things because they know that that's the end result. You'll get that you'll get people on side if they don't know how horrific these actions are.
Mm-hmm. Listen, I need to go, but I just wanted to couple of points before I get off. I wanted to say what you were saying about the abolitionists. It was actually more about the Haitian Revolution. So when history is one of my favorite subjects, like learning history. And I actually, when I came to this country in high school, I had a racist history teacher. He was blatant and honestly racist. So so he wasn't even what we were getting taught was racist, but he was actually a racist. And I would get into arguments. I'd be like, "No, sir," but this, and he's like, "No, keep quiet," you know. It was surreal and weird. Our geography teacher actually was more open-minded and was more teaching us the real history and the politics and the history of politics in this country. Shout out to Mr. Robinson. There's always a teacher in it. And he was Welsh. And now we hear that Wales want to teach real history, real history, And yeah, it was his way of getting us actually on side. There was about 5 or 6 of us. And he would guess, and he was also tell us about Welsh rugby and how they were like the Brazilian of rugby union, how they were just there was amazing rugby team in the 1970s, the most skillful. And it was this way because we're talking politics with him during, sometimes in the classroom as well. But I just wanted to, so it was slavery was unsustainable. All of the empires recognized that, but it was mainly the biggest scare, the biggest thing for the abolitionist movement was the Haitian Revolution, where literally the Haitians rock up and were chopping off slavers' heads. Like literally, that's what happened. And hence why Haiti is still now, because it was the French, the Americans, and the British, and Haiti is still being punished because it's the first ever black republic in the world. So before any other African country was free, Haiti, which was a destination where Africans were stolen and taken to Asia, got their independence. Because power concedes absolutely nothing, and at that time it was violence. It was a rebellion. It was to say, no, we're not savages. You're not keeping us in these inhumane conditions, and we're going to have to fight against that. Until this day, this is how history works. Till this day, Haiti's been punished because it rebelled. It's exactly similar dynamics to Cuba. Cuba is a little island just off the coast of the US. They rebelled against US imperialism and colonization. They had a revolution, but they're still being punished, because of that. The smaller you are, the more hard you are, the more example that's made of you. In terms of the abolitionist movement, there was a lot of Black and African people that were involved, nations that were involved, but there was a class solidarity of, for example, in Rochdale, there was the Rochdale mill workers who said, we're not going to, they went on strike and said, we're not going to work with cotton that is picked by slaves. So there was these different kind of things going on. But all of these things did not come from power people. It didn't come from power. It might have come from certain people in powerful positions speaking out or being lobbied to speak out, but that didn't come from it because it was the biggest money-making scheme. I just want to point out one true fact. David Cameron, who was the prime minister not so ago, his ancestors in today's money were paid 70 million. I think it is. If I'm not, I could be wrong, but 70 million, I think, compensation. So
you're absolutely right, Nordine. And if you guys want to look up, I think the records are online, and they come from the British Library records. You can see all of the families and of ancestors who basically bought slaves. So the Lloyd's group, the bank, they're included in it as well. So it's all of them. David Cameron is included. You're absolutely right, Nordine. And it was something to do with it was something close to that amount of money as well.
So all of these different things, and also just to forget before that as well, the first ever experimentation on this kind of global project of suppressing people, it started with the Irish. So while we're talking about the Greater Britain, what you just talked about, Greater Britain, Northern Ireland, this is on what's going on in Ireland. All of this, they were experimented. The British Empire, powers that be, experimented this suppression and brutality on the people closest to them and here, and the working classes. I mean, and the way equality is going now, the way the society is so unequal, we're going towards the feudal system. Feudal system comes from the feudal times where working class people were literally starving to death on the streets of Britain. And now we're going back to similar in terms of the amount of food banks are in this. So this is not even about race. I won't say racism, of course, because the first time when they defined to say somebody of our skin tone, melanated skin tone, is inferior, but before it was inferior by class and race. And a lot of white British people do have Stockholm syndrome when it comes to the upper classes. I'm telling you now, when they've been abused so much that they started falling in love with their abusers, because to say, look, that person, but at least you look like me. And that's how it was done in America. That's how it happened. It was the black and white slaves, because some of them were slaves, white slaves of Irish descent, were slaves in the US, who said, no, they said to the land, to the masters, we want peace of this land. We've worked, you promised us land. We worked on this land. We need to get our proportion of this land. But then the white masters called the white guys on their own, held a meeting and said, listen, we'll give you the land, but we won't give it to those those Africans. We won't give it to them. And actually, that's the whole thing where the policing system came from as well, where then those white endangered slaves then became the police that were making sure that they were picking
slave catchers.
Yeah, slave catchers. And that's what happened. So the idea that working class white people, right, if you're not part of the 1%, especially in this country, or that top percent, you are getting, and Linda, that's one of the first points you made on this podcast. You said it's about you as well, but because race is used to divide and rule, and gender and sexual, all of these things that are used to divide us all. But what we need to do is build. I don't know how many of you seen Judas and the Black Messiah. My hero, my political hero is Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton died at the age of 21. But Fred Hampton was such an incredible, just this incredible energy and life force to try to make change in this world. He brought together all sorts of people, brought together white working class, Latinos in the US, in Chicago especially. He brought everybody around class solidarity and understanding where their power lies and where there's differences, bringing them closer together, but also agreeing to disagree where there was, do you know what I mean, differences. To say, okay, this is how you view the world, but can we come and agree in the bits where we can work together? And I think that's really important. That is super important. But anyway, people, I need to get to this demo. Peace, love, light, always.
Thank you so much, Noureddin.
And lovely to meet you, Linda. Lovely to meet you as well, bro.
You too.
Bro.
And Lammy as well. Peace. Take care, guys.
Have a good one, bro.
Yeah. So yeah, just want to touch on. Oh, I hate this view.
Yeah, it's not good, is it? Oh, that's even better for me.
No, I hate it. There we go. Oh. No, so I just want to touch on that, because one of the big things, obviously, with education, obviously with the way that it's obviously systemic. We say this a lot because it's part of the system. It's inbuilt into how society is structured. And one of those ways that, you know, we can keep each other down is through the conditions, as we've covered, the conditions that will lead to certain acts. They know that keeping people poor, keeping people in terrible conditions will likely make them do certain things that they can then use to vilify that group of people in the media to everybody else, and then therefore justify harming them, being violent to them, being abusive to them, and locking them up. So one of the ways that these conditions are brought about is through healthcare and our right to healthcare and our right to be at optimal health. The fact that in this country we have the NHS is a miracle that we still have the NHS. It's obviously something that is not common in societies like ours to be able to attain as close to free healthcare as we do. It's a shame that it's limited to physical. I think that the mental health side has been completely attacked and not allowed to build structurally in a way that it's insane to me that we don't actually, as a society, just a quick off point, that we don't look at a person, a being, and think to make their life better, they will need their physical health checked out in addition to their mental health. Therapy should be 100% free in this country and in every country, but that's, you know, by the by. So yes, healthcare is a way to ensure that you oppress people further, if that's what you want to do as a system, as a power structure. And so one thing, we were talking about Corbyn earlier, and if only that, you know, he hadn't been vilified so much in the media. One thing he did mention was, hey guys, by the way, the Tories are about to sell off the NHS bit by bit to the US. And sure enough, recently it came out last month that NHS GP practice operator with about 500,000 patients passes into the hands of a US health insurer. It was done very, very, very quietly. There was a merger with a company called Centene Corp, and it covers 500,000 patients, fueling calls for inquiry into NHS privatization by stealth. So this is an article in The Guardian that was printed on the 26th of February. So it kind of goes into a little bit more detail as to what happened. But basically, the merger is expected to create the largest private supplier of GP services in the UK, with 58 practices covering 500,000 patients. This was all done, again, very, very hush-hush. People weren't really aware about it. And I know quite a lot of people aren't even aware that it's actually happened already now. But a coalition of doctors, campaigners and academics have voiced concerns in a letter sent this week to the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, asking him to order an investigation by the Care Quality Commission. And I just want to make a quick point in that, you know, that's like asking the devil to check the temperature of hell. It's just like, you know, he literally, it's just been proven like that it was unlawful what he did with these contracts, these COVID contracts, these PPE contracts. It was unlawful. These people are giving their friends money during a pandemic. And here we all are with the Stockholm syndrome that Nora Dean mentioned, where we just want to look at these people and think they're totally going to help us. Of course, they're for us. Of course, in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, they're going to still be looking out for us because that's their job, right? They're a member of parliament. They're there to help us. We voted them in. We give them money. We give them expenses. They have several houses. And of course, they wouldn't just take even more of our money, even more of our taxes, tell us that we're too poor for everyone to stay home so we can get rid of the virus quick enough. No. What they're going to do instead is take more public funds away from people with the unemployment rate as high as it is and give it to their friends to pretend that they are providing health supplies. And guess what? We're still going to run out of those as well. These people are evil, okay? There is an evil that exists in power right now in our societies. It is evil. It is bigger than anything that we are all arguing about on a day-to-day basis on Twitter, okay? These distractions are here on purpose. We're supposed to look at each other and think we're better than the other person because of our race or because of our religion or lack thereof, or because of our sexual orientation or because of our gender identity or because of our hair color or the straightness or curliness of it. Or all of these things are here to continue to distract us from the fact that the people running our countries right now are evil. pure
culture war
evil.
stuff. It's literally culture war stuff. Where it's what I think Putin's done in Russia for like the last 20 years. Is like if you can
Very
throw
well.
enough, very well. It's
He's
what
very good at
Trump
it.
copied. It's what I think what Boris is trying to do, but in some even worse way, because I think he really knows what he's doing, and I don't think Trump quite understood what he was doing because he's not as smart as he thinks he is. But yeah, it's just culture war stuff. It's to muddy the waters, to grow division between people. It's stupid, inane bollocks at the end of the day. It's
It's honestly
angry.
insane.
Yeah.
And then when you're aware of it, I know there's that saying of, if you're not angry, then you're not, is it aware? If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. My bad, sorry. So if you're not angry, you're not paying attention is how that saying goes. And it's really true because you end up just getting so frustrated and so angry. And then again, even that helps the power structures because then you just check out. I know that there's been times when I just completely check out. I'm like, I can't do this. It's fatigue. You're getting fatigued being this angry constantly. And you're just like, no, and clearly nobody else cares. So whatever. Why am I asked? Why can I just go and enjoy a program? Because it's not helpful. But that also, I also want to be very careful when we discuss these structures and we talk about the fact that these culture wars are brought out for a reason. It's still important for us to point out these injustices when we see them, even if they are not as systemic as the main thing in power, if that makes sense. So if we stick to healthcare for a second, when we're talking about Matt Hancock as health secretary, and the way these deals and the privatization of the NHS by stealth, which I love the way they phrase that. Yes, we can focus on those issues, and we shouldn't take our eyes or focus away from that. But we can also have the discussions of why Black women are dying at the rate that they are when giving birth, right? Why is that statistic so off? What is it? What's happening there?
Not just in the UK as well, in other Western countries like Canada, the United States of America, Australia. The statistic is high for Black women there too. Yeah.
And I think is it 3 times more likely to die during childbirth? 4 times more likely to die during childbirth. So what is happening in the way that we receive healthcare that's somehow different for Black women? What's going on there that we're in danger doing one of the most natural things ever, right?
And you know what? It's so great that you've actually brought this up, Linda, because obviously I know there's a documentary coming up talking about this, and there's another controversial issue in who was originally supposed to be hosting that documentary, as in, taken away from Candice Braithwaite, who, if you guys don't know, she is an activist, she's outspoken, she has experience in this subject, and she is a Black woman of color, a dark-skinned woman of color, and they took away this position that they offered to her to basically host this documentary, and they gave it to Rochelle Humes. And again, this brings up another issue of colorism, which is a huge issue in this world, in this culture, in this generation even. And it's just another issue. Can you see how one issue just breeds more issues? We're talking about the health of women, the health of Black women, and even in this issue, we're fighting against colorism. So it's just issues within issues. It's never ending, is it?
It's like you peel one layer off and then you go, oh my God, everything is shit. You go, oh no, what have I just unearthed? Because even when we are having a documentary talking about the rates in which women are dying in this country in childbirth when they happen to be Black, we still have those issues with who the hell is going to present this? Oh wait, we cannot go too dark. We have to go a little bit more palatable for the people who might watch this. We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings by having to put too much melanin on the screen at one time when we're having this discussion. It's insane. But speaking of pregnancy and childbirth, I did see something on Twitter last week, 10 days ago now. And it was by she goes by Pagan Lily, at Pagan Lily, and she put something interesting which I hadn't heard of. So I just wanted to read out the thread. It's very short, but she said you can't get an ultrasound in Newham, the London borough of Newham, unless you go private. I said to my doctor, it's okay. I would rather go private and make sure you have the capacity to service people who can't. He responded, it's not about capacity. They've just pulled the service. So if you can't go private, you run the risk of your health concern not being addressed. That's everything from liver issues, kidney issues, issues with your womb and pelvis, spleen, ovaries. There's no mistake. People will die. She's put a link on how to complain to the NHS, which I will also try to figure out how to put in the description of this video as well, if you're watching this after the stream. She then goes on to say, it's crazy because I have an amazing doctor, and you can hear he was absolutely raging. This man called me at 9 p.m. last night and had called every woman on the waiting list, so they didn't have to wait an extra week to know the service that could make a difference is no longer available. So to clarify, you can be referred to a private clinic as an NHS patient. If you have already received a date, i.e. your appointment is on X day, it wouldn't have affected you. I was on a waiting list for an appointment. No appointment had been issued, and the waiting list has now been scrapped. So unless you had a date already, if you were just on the waiting list to get a date, the list is done. The list is gone. So this is warfare, right?
I hear the same thing. I hear the same concept that comes with the American healthcare system, basically. If you don't have money, we don't care. Die for all we care. That's all I hear. All I hear.
And that goes back to what Noureddin was saying very early on in this episode, where he said, you know, what America does, we follow pretty quickly. You know, we have this thing in this country where we're like, oh, at least it's not as bad as in America. Well, okay. So first of all, a lot of these structures that they rely on were invented here, at least in modern day terms. A lot of the structures and a lot of the things that they can draw back on are things that came from here. And two, yes, they often have the more exaggerated version because they have the more extreme version of capitalism. But if we continue the way that we are going right there too. We're headed in that same direction. And if something like this can happen, where in a whole London borough, if you happen to be on a waiting list, you now have to pay for private or not get the healthcare that you so urgently need, to identify whatever issue could be going on, is war. It is raging war on the poorer people. London Borough of Newham, no secret if you know of it, is not a rich borough. It is no Kensington. It is not, you know, somewhere that has a lot of money in the council. It has high population of working class and working poor people, and this is who it's going to
really
affect.
High rates of unemployment as well.
High rates of unemployment. This is happening during a pandemic as well, where ultimately the unemployment rates will be even higher than they usually are. And we know that they don't care about poor people. They don't care about poor boroughs. And even in richer boroughs where there just so happens to be a poor area, let's talk about Grenfell for a quick second, they will still do things to cut costs and put your life at risk. And then they will blame you because you are poor and you live there.
Tory Brexit Britain, isn't it? Like, it's
where we're going. It's where we're going. And the Stockholm syndrome in this country, that's such a great way to put it by Noureddin, because it is true. You know, the white working poor will then go, well, at least, you know, it's not happening to me. Well, it is. You just haven't seen it yet, or it's just not quite as bad, but it's happening to you too. If you're struggling right now in a pandemic, there is no reason, with the resources of this country, with all that's been done, there is no reason that you should be struggling right now during this pandemic. There is no reason anyone on this tiny little island should be struggling. And yet, look around you.
And this is literally exactly why I feel we have such a problem where you are complicit in your silence, basically. So if you don't stand up and speak up for other people who are facing injustices, and I understand why people do it, oh, it doesn't affect me, I'm not going to get involved, it's got nothing to do with me, I'm going to mind my own business. To that I say, hell no, don't ever do that. And me personally, I can only speak for myself, I never ever mind my own business, never. If I see an injustice going on, I have to speak up, because circumstances change so quickly in life, and this is what happens. You can be on top of the world 1 minute and then rock bottom the next, and this is literally how life and the world works. So that could be you. It might not be you at the current moment in time, but in about 2 years or 2 months, that could be you, because life and circumstances can change so quickly, so drastically, so dramatically. So for you to see other injustices happening to other people, not speak up, not say anything about it because it's not personally happening to you. When it does happen to you 2 months later down the line, or however long it may be, don't complain. Don't ask why nobody's speaking up for you, because you never spoke up for anybody in the first place. This is why we all need to speak up for each other. So when we find ourselves in these positions, other people will be willing to speak up for you because they remember when you spoke up for them. And this is how we all support each other. This is how we all win. This is how we all ensure our voices are heard.
If it was possible, oh, go on. I was going to say is that if it was possible to switch patriotism to mean I pay my way fairly, I support everyone in my community. If you can switch patriotism from flag shagging knobheads to meaning supporting everything within your local community, within your country, to the best of your ability, without targeting, without causing division, what doesn't need to be there, that's what true patriotism should be about. And if you can make that switch, I think everyone will be better. But right-wing media is going to be flag shagging always. So
you're absolutely right, and I think you're so right with the whole patriotism thing. Like, the flag has absolutely nothing to do with you being there for your community. If we want to talk about tribalism, it's innate in us. We can't change that. What we can change is how we show up, right? How we show up for our community. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna feel tribalistic. Did I just make that up? That's right. I'm going to feel tribalistic with my people, with my community. Yeah, sure, why not? With my community, my local area. I'm going to want to support my friends who have businesses. Shout out Mortality. I'm going to want to support my people because that's my tribe. That's my job within this tribe. Just like they will show up for me, I will show up for them. That's how we need to treat this whole patriotism thing. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Union Jack at all.
Zero. My 2 pence on it anyway.
I completely agree. You're absolutely right. And that is true patriotism, to be honest, Linda. That's the true patriotism.
100%. And I think, look, that's probably a great way to end the episode, because I don't want it to just be so like, oh, look at all the things that are wrong. Oh my God. Like, yes, there's a lot wrong, and it's not that we should look away. But there is hope. There's little things that we can do, that we can implement in ourselves. It can sometimes feel like such a huge problem and so many different types of problems when you start looking at it, that it feels overwhelming. Let's try not to get overwhelmed. Do the little that we can. Try have a little bit more empathy, because like Lam said, look, might not be happening to you right now, but in 2 months, in 2 days, in 2 hours, the way this world is going, it could happen to you. So let's try and have a little bit more empathy with each other, a little bit more grace, understanding that, you know, I might not like you for whatever reason, right? But I don't want to see the system trample all over you. I might not agree with your views on Twitter. I might think you're a bit of an idiot. I might not like your opinions, right? But that doesn't mean that I want to see a massive corporation be able to tell you that you cannot be on there unless you're causing harm. That's a whole other discussion. But the point is, just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean that you shouldn't defend your fellow person in making sure that their rights are not trampled all over. That just because protesting isn't for you doesn't mean that you should just be fine with this bill coming along and making all protesting basically illegal. Like, let's not do that, right? And let's have a little bit more empathy, a little bit more understanding of each other. Be aware of what we're doing, how we're using our voices, again, how we're spending our money. That's a big thing. Everything comes down to money at the end of it. So how you spend your money, you might think it's only, you know, the odd 20 quid here and the odd recurring 10 quid here. No. That is part of what makes these corporations and these people so powerful. So be very, very aware and careful about how you're spending your money in ways that you can help it. Again, you can't help your internet service provider more often than not. You can't help who you pay your electric bill to. There's lots of things that we can't help, but there's so much that we also can. And keep the money in the ecosystem where possible. Support your friends, support your people, support your community. Show up for people in the way that you want them to show up for you. And hopefully keep tuning into this every couple of weeks when we do it.
Cancel your Amazon as well, scumbags.
Yeah.
Don't. Oh,
Support
don't.
us
I've
instead.
said all that and I have got
Scumbags.
Prime. I said all of
Scumbags.
that and I've got Prime. Listen, one day at a time. We're going to do what we can, okay? One thing at a time.
But for now, if you guys would like to donate your money to Sarcasm City TV, all donations are accepted, however large or small.
Nice. All right. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And also, if you have any creative friends, support them during this time as well. Subscribe to their Patreons or ask them their PayPal. If you've got a little bit extra, support who you use your money wisely, I think is what we're saying. And at some point, I will cancel that Prime. I will. If I say enough times, I'll do it.
Mine is because I've got it free for like 6 months because I'm a student. I'm a master's student at the moment.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'm just enjoying that for 6 months.
Oh, yeah. We're work in progresses, I think. We can do this.
Always.
If we try, we can do it. All right, guys, that's going to be the end of it. Thank you so much for everyone that tuned in. I know there was loads of comments. I'll try and get better in the future with putting the comments up on the screen. I just wanted the first episode to kind of be the conversation between us, and then we'll get you lot involved moving forward. So it looks like our next episode will be on Easter Saturday. So hopefully that's okay for everybody to take some time out to have a bit of a rant on here. But yeah, thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Mike. Check out Mortality. Check out Redline Picture. Lambs, it was so great to meet you. I can't wait to have these more.
Class Warfare t-shirt.
Definitely.
Yes, get one of those.
Class Warfare t-shirts.
I don't know these people. They aren't necessarily part of my ecosystem, but I love their messaging. It's a company called Fuck the Tories, and I've got their earrings on right now, which says Eat the Rich, and I've got their ring that also says Fuck the Tories. Check out Fuck the Tories Jewelry on Instagram. Go on their website if you've got a little bit of extra money. They've got Fuck the Patriarchy is one of the new ones that came out. There's lots of stuff there, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Yeah, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Have a good one.